Here's another special edition of Misquote Monday. This one combines 10 previously released episodes. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "Do not let your happiness depend on something you may lose"? Writers need to be careful about giving examples of what they do not agree with. If someone isn't carefully reading what's written, then the reader might falsely think you are agreeing with some notion. That's the case with this quotation. It's found in the final chapter of The Four Loves, but it's a sentiment Lewis does not agree with. Interestingly, this is Lewis's summary of a conclusion St. Augustine made in his Confessions. Lewis is addressing whether a person should risk giving their heart to another because of the potential of the pain of losing them. Lewis paraphrases St. Augustine as suggesting one should not give their heart to anything but God. Lewis disagrees, warning, who could conceivably begin to love God because the security, so to speak, is better? Finally, here's a quote more specifically addressing happiness that people should be sharing. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "A myth is a lie that conveys a truth"? You can choose to agree with this quote or not. That's not the point. The issue is whether Lewis is the author. He did not write this, and so don't claim he did. Isaac Asimov is credited with a statement that this quotation is probably a good paraphrase. Plus, there's a recent article about another person making a more concise statement along these lines. What were Lewis's views on myth? My friend Charlie Starr wrote a book on this topic, so it's impossible to fully explain it here. I did a podcast series with Dr. Starr, and you can see the description for a link. An essay by Lewis entitled "Myth Became Fact," found in the book God and the Doc, is a good place to learn more about his views on myth. You're seeing one of the many great statements Lewis makes there in the nearly 2,000-word article. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "Be sure that the patient remains completely fixated on politics"? This is the first part of a lengthier statement that, as far as I can tell, debuted on social media in October 2016. The memes say it is from the Screwtape Letters, a book that was published in 1942. Lewis did begin each letter with "My dear Wormwood," and the last two words in all but one letter are "Uncle Screwtape." That's all that is correct about the images seen online. Lewis never ended the letters with "Keep up the good work." Instead, it was "Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape." Another fishy thing is the letter length. In his book, they are usually in the 800 to 1,000 word range. This letter is just over 100 words. My conclusion is someone was trying to write in the style Lewis did in his book and didn't want to take credit for what should have easily been seen as a copycat. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind"? Spoiler alert for this expression. The answer is sort of. That is, the questionable quote adds two words. Lewis actually wrote, "There are better things ahead than any we leave behind." No big deal, right? Except context matters for even the correct quotation. Isolated, they may seem fitting for a graduation card or even words to encourage a person that they will have a better future in this present life. The problem is, in context, these words, found in a letter to Mary Willis Shelburne, are telling her to not be afraid of dying, which she was fearing at the time. So, when you consider the context, it is very unlikely that what Lewis meant is what you take away from the quote when it is this isolated. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "One of the most cowardly things ordinary people do is to shut their eyes to facts"? Everybody repeat after me. It is important to consider the context of a quote. One of my Facebook friends even created a meme to help you remember this. Thanks, David Jack. This quotation is in one of Lewis's books, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, a work of fiction. It's actually a diary entry from Eustace, and he credits it as a statement made by Harold, Eustace's father, whom he always called by his first name. While you could read into the quote that whoever is not agreeing with you is ignoring the facts, calling someone a coward is very unlike what the real Lewis would do. Additionally, if you've read Lewis, then you know the use of ordinary in this quote is not at all like how he would use it. He wrote, "There are no ordinary people." Did C.S. Lewis really say, "Education without values, as useful as it is, seems rather to make man a more clever devil"? Back in 2014, I remember reading this quotation and thinking how true it was, and I was impressed that it was Lewis who made such a crafty statement. The trouble was, not only did Lewis not say it, but he wouldn't even agree with half the words. Some may object and say, this can't be true, because he makes this point in The Abolition of Man, or at least some memes claim that's the source of this quote. I checked my digital copy and it's not there, nor is it in any of his other writings. Plus, as the late Dr. Bruce Edwards pointed out to me, Lewis didn't believe there is such a thing as education without values, and that even if there was, how could it really be useful? Check out these quotes from other authors that are more similar to what Lewis never wrote. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "Love is never wasted, for its value does not rest upon reciprocity"? Love is supposed to conquer everything, right? If you know your Bible, however, then you are aware there is no verse that says, "Love conquers all." That phrase is from the Latin poet Virgil. And yet, because God's love conquers our sin, you might say the Bible would agree with that expression. Or maybe you wouldn't. Likewise, the "love is never wasted" quotation, while not by Lewis, might possibly be something he'd concur with. Even so, let's credit the real author, Neil A. Maxwell, an elder from the Latter-day Saints, or at least that is the most likely source of the quote. Speaking of sources for quotations, the Quotable Lewis, an excellent book for finding verified quotes by him, offers 46 quotes related to love. Here are a couple from Mere Christianity and an essay entitled The World's Last Night. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "The greatest evils in the world will not be carried out by men with guns, but by men in suits sitting behind desks"? The short answer is no, but they are a decent paraphrase of half of what Lewis wrote. I tracked the quote to a 2012 book whose footnote stated it came from a 1983 speech by President Ronald Reagan. This is the famous Evil Empire speech from March 8th, and he does quote C.S. Lewis, and gets it right, except for a minor error. So where does the paraphrase that distorts some of Lewis's thoughts come from? Currently it is unclear, however it is most likely from a newspaper summarizing the speech. In the second preface to the Screwtape Letters, Lewis does write about the greatest evil, but he doesn't contrast it with guns. Additionally, what Lewis writes is 3 times the length of the fake quote. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "Isn't it funny how, day by day, nothing changes, but when you look back, everything is different"? There's a funny thing about this expression. When I look back on my research and the feedback I've received, a lot has changed. Initially, it seemed this quote might be from Prince Caspian, either the book or movie. It wasn't, nor was it in any other Narnia book or movie. In the last few years, I've seen a single image suggesting it comes from the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes. However, the image on social media doesn't give a date for the comic. Then, these first 2 panes from a 1995 strip reveal wording by Calvin that is, well, different. Either way, Bill Watterson, the cartoonist who created Calvin and Hobbes, should have credit for the expression. However, Lewis did write something similar in Mere Christianity that could have been the inspiration for him. Did C.S. Lewis really say, "My prayer is that when I die, all of hell rejoices that I am out of the fight"? Lewis wrote about prayer various times, and he also dealt with hell in a variety of writings. However, notice the word rejoices in this quote. Would Lewis ever say hell rejoices? Back in early 2017, when I wrote about this expression, I was fortunate enough to discover a site that addressed it earlier. A missionary named Charles Thomas Studd is credited with writing the similar expression, "I pray that when I die, all of hell will rejoice that I am out of the fight." C.T. Studd was born in the UK, and he died in 1931. This quotation might remind you of a comparable Irish saying, "May you be in heaven a full half hour before the devil knows you're dead." Could it be the reason Lewis's name became associated with the variation by C.T. Studd was because Lewis was born in Ireland?